The barbell clattered against the rack, its echo swallowed by the hum of the gym. I was drowning in the rhythm of my own heartbeat, the weight of the world pressing harder than the 225 pounds I just lifted. Then he walked in, Javier, my gym buddy, with that easy grin that could unravel anyone's defenses. Seattle's Iron Pulse Gym was my sanctuary, a place where Marcus Reed, a 28-year-old graphic designer, could escape the chaos of deadlines and the nagging void of loneliness. I'd moved here 2 years ago from Atlanta, chasing a dream job at a tech startup, but the city's gray skies and fast pace left me feeling like a stranger in my own life. The gym, with its clang of metal and pulse of energy, was where I rebuilt myself, one rep at a time. Javier Torres, 29, was the opposite of me in every way. Where I was cautious, he was reckless. Where I overthought, he acted on instinct. A personal trainer with a chiseled frame and a laugh that filled the room. He'd been spotting me for months. Our banter a mix of trash talk and something deeper I couldn't name. Today, though, something was different. His dark eyes lingered on me a second too long as he adjusted the weights. "Yo, Marcus, you ready to push it today?" he asked, his voice low, teasing. I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow, trying to ignore the way his presence made my pulse race. I was no stranger to attraction, but this felt dangerous, like stepping onto a tightrope without a net. I'd always kept my guard up, especially after growing up in a family where being openly gay wasn't an option. Coming out at 22 had cost me their approval, and I'd spent years building walls to protect myself. Javier, though, had a way of slipping through the cracks. "Spot me on this one?" he asked, lying back on the bench press. I stood over him, hands ready, my focus split between the barbell and the way his chest rose with each breath. He pushed through his set, grunting with effort, and when he racked the bar, he didn't move. Instead, he looked up at me, his gaze unguarded, almost daring. "You ever think about what you really want, Marcus?" The question hit like a punch. I laughed it off, stepping back, but my heart was hammering. "What, like a protein shake or a vacation?" quipped, deflecting. He sat up, swinging his legs off the bench, his eyes never leaving mine. "Nah, man. Like, what makes you feel alive?" His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made the air feel electric. I didn't have an answer, not one I was ready to admit. That night I couldn't sleep. Javier's words echoed in my head, stirring something I'd buried long ago. The longing to be seen, not just as Marcus the designer or Marcus the gym rat, but as me, flaws and all. I dated before, brief flings that fizzled out, but Javier was different. He wasn't just a crush. He was a question I wasn't sure I had the courage to answer. The next morning, I found him waiting at the gym, his usual grin replaced by something softer, almost nervous. "Got a proposition for you," he said, tossing me a towel. "There's this charity run in Capitol Hill tomorrow. 5 miles, good cause. You in?" I raised an eyebrow. "You trying to kill me, Torres?" He laughed, but his eyes were serious. "Nah, just trying to see what you're made of." I said yes, not because I loved running, but because I couldn't say no to him. That decision, I'd soon learn, would change everything. The streets of Capitol Hill buzzed with life, a kaleidoscope of rainbow flags and cheering crowds. The charity run was for a local LGBTQ plus youth shelter, and the energy was infectious. Music blaring, runners stretching, volunteers handing out water. I felt out of place, my nerves buzzing as I laced up my sneakers next to Javier, who looked annoyingly perfect in his fitted tank top and running shorts. "You sure you're ready for this, Reed?" he teased, nudging my shoulder. His touch sent a jolt through me, and I prayed he didn't notice the flush creeping up my neck. Born ready, I lied, forcing a grin. Truth was, I hadn't run 5 miles since high school track, and the thought of keeping up with Javier's effortless stride was daunting. But it wasn't just the run that had me on edge. It was him. Every glance, every casual touch, felt like a test I was failing. The starting gun fired, and we were off, weaving through the pack. Javier stayed close, matching my pace, his encouragement steady. "Keep it smooth, Marcus. You got this." His voice was a lifeline, pulling me through the burn in my legs. By mile 3, I was gasping, but his presence kept me grounded. We crossed the finish line together, sweaty and breathless, collapsing onto the grass in a park nearby. "Damn, you're tougher than you look," Javier said, lying back, his arm brushing mine. The contact felt deliberate, and my heart stuttered. I turned to him, catching my breath. "You're not so bad yourself." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking at me with an intensity that made the world fade away. "You know, Marcus, I've been wanting to say something." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I like you. Like, really like you." The words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. My mouth went dry. I'd spent so long hiding my own feelings, convincing myself I didn't deserve this kind of connection, that I didn't know how to respond. "Javier," I started, but the words caught in my throat. He sat up fully, his expression a mix of hope and fear. "You don't have to say anything now. Just think about it." I nodded, my mind a whirlwind. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Food trucks, laughter, the crowd's energy. But all I could think about was Javier's confession. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed his words, each one chipping away at the walls I'd built. I wanted to say yes, to take the leap, but fear clung to me like a shadow. What if I let him in and it all fell apart? The next week at the gym, things were different. Javier was still his charming self, but there was a new weight to our interactions, a quiet tension that made every moment feel charged. Then, during a late-night session, he asked me to grab coffee after. Not as gym buddies, but as something more. We ended up at a cozy cafe in Fremont, the kind with mismatched chairs and fairy lights. Over steaming mugs, Javier opened up about his past. Growing up in a conservative family in Texas, coming out at 20, the rejection that followed. His story mirrored mine in ways that hurt to acknowledge, but it also made me feel seen. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "All the time," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Maybe we can stop running together." The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments. Late-night talks, runs through the city, quiet evenings at Javier's apartment watching old movies. Each moment with him felt like a step towards something real, something I'd never dared to hope for. But the closer we got, the louder my doubts became. I'd never been in a relationship that lasted more than a few months. My family's rejection had left scars, and the idea of opening myself up to Javier, to the possibility of love and loss, terrified me. Yet every time he smiled, every time he pulled me close, those fears seemed smaller, like shadows shrinking in the light. One evening, Javier invited me to a community event at the youth shelter we'd run for. It was a fundraiser, a mix of drag performances and open mic poetry, held in a vibrant community center in Belltown. The room was packed, the air thick with laughter and hope. Javier was in his element, charming everyone, but his eyes kept finding mine, grounding me in the chaos. After a poet's heartfelt reading about identity, Javier took my hand under the table. "You okay?" he whispered, sensing my unease. I nodded, but the truth was I felt exposed. Being here, surrounded by people celebrating who they were, made me confront how much I'd been hiding. I'd come out years ago, but I'd never fully embraced it, not the way Javier did, with unapologetic pride. Later, as we walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting off the Puget Sound, I stopped. "Javier, how do you do it?" I asked. "How do you just be yourself, no matter what?" He looked out at the water, his expression thoughtful. "It's not easy. I lost people I loved when I came out, but I decided I'd rather be alone than live a lie. Then I met you, and," he turned to me, his eyes soft. "I don't feel alone anymore." My chest tightened. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that he made me want to be braver, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed him, right there under the stars with the sound of waves in the background. It was my first real leap, and it felt like flying. But the next day, reality crashed in. My boss, Emily, called me into her office. "Marcus, we've got a big project in New York. They want you to lead it. It's a 6-month gig, starting next month. New York, a dream opportunity, but 3,000 miles from Javier." I told him that night, expecting support, but his face fell. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice tight. "It's not forever," I said, but the words felt hollow. He looked away, jaw clenched. "I thought we were building something here." "We are," I insisted, but doubt crept in. Was I running again? The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. Javier and I tried to keep things normal. Gym sessions, coffee dates, late-night talks. But the looming move hung over us like a storm cloud. I wanted to stay, to choose him, but the job was a chance to prove myself in ways I'd always dreamed of. I felt torn, my heart pulling me toward Javier, my ambition pulling me toward New York. One night, after a tense dinner where we barely spoke, Javier broke the silence. "Marcus, are you scared of this? Of us?" I froze, the question cutting too close. "I'm not scared," I lied. I don't know how to do this." He stepped closer, his voice steady but raw. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just tell me what you want." "I want you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "But I also want this job. I don't know how to have both." He took my hand, his grip firm. "Then we figure it out. Together." His words were a lifeline, but the doubts lingered. What if I failed him? What if I failed myself? The next day, I got a call from my sister, Lena, the only family member who'd stood by me after I came out. "Marcus, you sound happy when you talk about him," she said. "Don't let fear take that away." Her words hit hard, but they didn't erase the tension. Javier and I kept trying, but every moment felt fragile, like we were holding on to something that could slip away. Then, one night at the gym, everything unraveled. We were spotting each other on deadlifts, the gym nearly empty. Javier set the bar down and turned to me, his face serious. "If you go to New York, what happens to us?" I didn't have an answer. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he shook his head. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt, Marcus. I need to know you're in this." "I am," I said, but my voice cracked. He walked away, leaving me standing there, the weight of my indecision heavier than any barbell. For the next week, we barely spoke. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the ache, but it was no use. Javier was everywhere. In the gym, in my thoughts, in the quiet moments when I couldn't escape myself. I knew I had to make a choice, but the fear of choosing wrong paralyzed me. The day before I was set to leave for New York, I stood in my apartment, surrounded by packed boxes, feeling like I was unraveling. I'd spent the week replaying every moment with Javier, every laugh, every touch, every time he'd made me feel like I was enough. Couldn't let him go, not like this. I found him at the gym, alone, wiping down equipment. He looked up, his expression guarded. "Thought you'd be halfway to New York by now," he said, his voice flat. "I'm not gone yet," I replied, stepping closer. "Javier, I messed up. I've been so scared of losing you that I pushed you away instead." He crossed his arms, but his eyes softened. "I'm still here, Marcus, but I need to know you're not gonna run every time things get hard." "I'm done running," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I love you. I don't know how we make this work, but I want to try. With you." For a moment, he just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the distance between us, pulling me into a kiss that felt like coming home. It wasn't a promise that everything would be easy, it wasn't, but it was a promise to try. I took the job in New York, but Javier and I made a plan. Long distance, video calls, visits every month. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We spent my last night in Seattle together, walking through the park where we'd shared that first kiss, talking about the future. Not just mine or his, but ours. Months later, at the same charity run in Capitol Hill, I flew back to surprise him. When I crossed the finish line, he was there, waiting, his grin as bright as the sun. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other. And in that moment, breathless and wanting more, I knew that was enough.